If you've ever opened someone else's life on a screen and felt your own quietly shrink, this story is for you. That tightening in your chest when you see the house, the trip, the number someone else seems to have reached before you. It isn't jealousy. It's older than that. It's fear wearing a different coat. Today I want to tell you about a merchant who spent 30 years measuring his life against another man's ledger, and a monk who finally asked him one question he had never let himself hear. The merchant's answer to that question changed nothing about his money and everything about his nights. We'll get to what he said. But first you need to understand how a man builds an entire life around a number that was never his to chase. Before we go further, tell me in the comments, whose life do you catch yourself comparing your bank account to? A sibling, a friend, someone you've never even met? You might be surprised how many people are carrying the exact same weight tonight. The town was called Rasenna, tucked where a river slowed before reaching the sea, in a time when merchants tracked their fortunes not on screens, but in leather-bound ledgers, ink fading with the years. The market smelled of cedar and saltfish, and along its main row stood two trading houses, side by side, built the same year, by two young men who had once been friends. One was named Ferran, the other was named Kava. They had started with the same coin, the same ambition, the same hunger to prove that a poor father's son could still build something with his own hands. For the first few years, they even helped each other, sharing a warehouse, splitting a shipment when storms delayed their goods, eating dinner together after long days at the docks. But somewhere in the second decade, something shifted. Kava's ships began arriving fuller. His house grew a second floor, then a third. He married into a family with land near the hills, and his children wore cloth that Ferran's children only touched in the market stalls, never bought. Ferran told himself he did not mind. He told himself this every morning, which is usually the surest sign that a man minds very much. He was not poor. This is important to understand because the story is not about scarcity. Ferran's warehouse was full. His family ate well. His name was respected on the docks. By any honest measure, he had built a life that most men in Rasenna would have called fortunate. But honesty was not what Ferran measured by anymore. He measured by Kava. Every ledger entry became a comparison. Every good season felt smaller the moment he heard that Kava's had been better. He began asking dock workers, casually, what cargo Kava's ships carried. He began walking past Kava's house on evenings when he told his wife he was checking on the warehouse. He was not checking on the warehouse. He was counting windows, counting the lanterns lit at dusk, counting a wealth that was never his to count. His wife noticed first, the way wives often do. She noticed that Ferran no longer spoke of his own good fortune without immediately weighing it against someone else's. A good harvest of trade goods would arrive, and instead of gratitude he would ask quietly, almost to himself, whether Kava's harvest had been larger. She began to dread the evenings when news came in from the docks, because she knew whatever number arrived, Ferran would spend the night turning it into a smaller version of Kava's number instead of simply the number it was. She said nothing for a long time. But what she didn't know was that Ferran had already begun making decisions no sound merchant should make. There is a particular kind of tiredness that comes from living two lives at once, your actual one, and the shadow life you keep building in your head out of someone else's fortune. Ferran did not sleep the way he once had. He would lie awake doing arithmetic that had nothing to do with his own accounts. How many ships Kava's fleet now held, how many years it might take to close a gap that existed mostly in his imagination, how his own children's modest cloth compared to the fine weave Kava's wore to temple. None of this arithmetic ever balanced. It was never meant to. A mind doing comparison math is not solving a problem. It is manufacturing one, fresh, every single night. He took a loan he did not need to expand a warehouse that was already large enough, simply because Kava had expanded his. He invested in a shipping route he did not understand because he had heard, only heard, never confirmed, that Kava was profiting from something similar. Remember this detail. It matters later. The loan was not reckless in the way that ruins men overnight. It was worse than that. It was reckless in the slow, respectable way that ruins them over years, one reasonable-sounding decision at a time. By the time Ferran was 50, his warehouse held more goods than it ever had. His debts were larger than they had ever been too, carried quietly, serviced on time, invisible to anyone who did not look closely at his books. And still, some nights he would stand at his window, look toward the lantern light of Kava's house on the hill, and feel the same hollow ache he had felt at 25. He had built an entire second life in that 30 years, and it had not moved him an inch closer to peace. It was in that year that a traveling monk came through Rasenna, staying in a small room above the tea house near the harbor, the kind of guest no one paid much attention to until they needed him. Ferran met him almost by accident. His youngest daughter had fallen ill, and the monk was known to sit with the sick and speak calming words, nothing more mystical than that. He came to Ferran's house 3 evenings in a row, and on the third evening, with the daughter finally sleeping peacefully, the monk accepted a cup of tea and sat across from Ferran in the quiet of the front room. He did not lecture. He simply asked, in a tone so plain it almost seemed like an afterthought, "Whose life are you living tonight? Yours or his?" Ferran laughed it off. He said something about the price of grain, about the season, about nothing in particular. But this is where everything changed. The monk did not press. He only waited, the way people who are not afraid of silence know how to wait. And in that silence, something in Ferran cracked open just slightly. Not enough to speak yet, but enough to feel the question land somewhere true. For 2 more years, that question followed him. It followed him into his ledgers, into his sleepless nights, into the moments he caught himself walking past a house on the hill that was not his own. He kept telling himself he would answer it someday, once things settled, once he had enough, though he could never quite say what enough would look like, because the target kept moving every time Kava's ships came in. Then came the season that broke the pattern, though not in the way you might expect. There was no storm that ruined him, no dramatic collapse. What happened was smaller and, in its own way, harder to bear. Kava died, quietly, in his sleep, at the height of his wealth, leaving behind 3 sons who spent the following year in bitter dispute over the very fortune Ferran had spent 30 years measuring himself against. Ferran attended the funeral. He stood at the back, the way a man stands when he is not sure what he is allowed to feel. And walking home that evening, past the lantern-lit house that would soon be sold in pieces to settle the sons' quarrels, he finally understood what the monk had asked him 2 years before. He sought out the old monk again, who by then had settled permanently in the small room above the tea house. And this time, Ferran did not talk about grain prices. He sat down and asked plainly, "How do I stop measuring myself against a life that was never mine?" The monk was quiet for a long moment. Then he answered, and his answer was only 7 words. "Compare your bowl, not your neighbor's harvest." That was all. Ferran sat with it, waiting for more, the way we always wait for wisdom to explain itself further. It didn't come. The monk simply refilled his own cup and let the silence do the rest of the teaching. Here is what those 7 words meant, and why they matter for you as much as they mattered for a merchant in a river town centuries ago. A bowl holds exactly what it needs to hold. It was never built to match another bowl's size. A harvest, on the other hand, is a comparison waiting to happen. Bigger, smaller, better, worse, always measured against a field that is not your own. Ferran had spent 30 years comparing his harvest to Kava's harvest, when the only honest question was ever whether his own bowl was full. You have a bowl too. It might be your income, your savings, the roof over your head, the people who sit at your table. And somewhere, right now, there is a harvest you keep glancing at. A friend's new house, a stranger's vacation photos, a sibling's promotion, a number on someone else's account that you were never meant to see and can never fully verify anyway. That harvest was never yours to measure against. You cannot see its debts. You cannot see its sleepless nights. You are comparing your entire visible life to someone else's edited highlight and calling the resulting ache falling behind when really it is just a bowl forgetting its own shape. Think about what Ferran actually lost in those 30 years. Not money. His warehouse was full the entire time. What he lost were evenings. Thousands of them, spent doing arithmetic that led nowhere, spent walking past a house that was never his, spent unable to enjoy a good season because some other man's season might have been slightly better. That is the real cost of comparison, and it rarely shows up on any ledger. It shows up as absence, the absence of a peaceful dinner, a full night's sleep, a good year allowed to simply be good, without an asterisk pointing toward somebody else's number. And notice something else about the story. Kava, the man Ferran spent decades measuring himself against, never once asked to be the measuring stick. He built his own life, sailed his own ships, made his own choices. Most of them, we can guess, with the same private doubts and quiet worries that every merchant carries. He did not know he was living rent-free inside Ferran's ledger of self-worth. This is worth sitting with. The people we compare ourselves to are almost never running the race we think they're running. They are simply living the way we are simply living, and we are the ones who turned their harvest into our scoreboard. This is the single idea worth carrying out of this story. Contentment is not about having enough by the world's measure. It is about no longer needing the world's measure at all. Kava's fortune did not save him from a bitter ending. Ferran's 30 years of comparison did not add one true hour of peace to his life. The chase itself was the cost. Not the money he spent, but the years he handed over to a race no one had actually asked him to run. So tonight, I want to leave you with 3 small things, practical enough to do today, but rooted in the same understanding Ferran finally reached. First, name your bowl. Take a few minutes and write down plainly what you actually have. Not what you wish you had, not what you're behind on, just what is true right now. A roof, an income, people who love you, skills that took years to build. This is not a gratitude exercise for its own sake. It is a boundary. It reminds your mind where your own life ends and someone else's harvest begins. Keep the list somewhere you'll actually see it again. A drawer, a phone note, a page in a journal. Because the mind that compares will try to forget this list exists within a week. Second, notice the moment you cross that boundary. The next time you feel that familiar tightening, scrolling, comparing, doing quiet math about someone else's life, pause and ask yourself the same question the monk asked Ferran. Whose life am I living right now? Mine or theirs? You don't need a perfect answer. Just asking it out loud if you can breaks the trance. Most comparison thrives on being unconscious. The instant you name it, it loses half its grip. Third, choose one number this week that you stop checking against anyone else. Maybe it's your savings, maybe it's your home, maybe it's simply how your week went. Measure it only against your own bowl from last month. Did it grow a little, hold steady, or shrink for a reason you understand? That is the only comparison that was ever honest to begin with, because it is the only comparison where you actually know both sides of the story. Picture Ferran, years later, an old man now, sitting by the same window where he once watched Kava's lanterns. The Hill House has changed hands twice since the Sons sold it. Ferran's own house is smaller, quieter, unremarkable by the standards he once lived by. And yet he sits there most evenings with something he never had in 30 years of chasing. A bowl he finally sees clearly, and finds, without needing to compare it to anything, that it is full. That is his lesson, spoken once, near the end of his life, to his own daughter, the same one who had been sick the night the monk first sat in his front room. He told her, "I spent 30 years afraid that Kava's harvest was proof I was falling behind. It took his death to teach me that a man can win every comparison and still lose his whole life to it." And that is the lesson for you too, whoever you are, wherever you are tonight, doing quiet math in your head about a life that was never yours to measure. You are not behind. You are simply looking at a harvest that was never your bowl to fill. If this story gave you even one honest breath tonight, there are more waiting for you here. Next time, I want to tell you about a widow who was offered a fortune to forget a debt that was never truly owed, and what she chose to keep instead. Until then, walk gently, hold loosely,